Hello, and welcome to the Crowley ISD PLC Curriculum Preview for English 2, Unit 1. I'm Sharon Graves, Secondary ELAR Curriculum Coordinator. I look forward to working with teachers and instructional leaders throughout the school year. Please feel free to communicate with me anytime for questions or additional support. English 2, Unit 1, Traveling Through World Literature, is 23 instructional days beginning August 28th through September 30th. The district has allowed for 3 days for beginning of the year procedures. Assessment posting date for printing purposes is September 29th and the assessment date is October 1st. Per the local assessment guidelines, teachers are to administer unit assessments within 3 school days upon completion of the unit. For today's purposes, I will identify curriculum hotspots and provide comprehension instructional strategies, which include close reading using notice and note, anchor questions, and Fundamental 5. I will lead you through an analysis of the cognitive content and context of the readiness standards. I will provide seed questions for discussion in your PLC, complete the content builder and the PLC for Reading PLC for Readiness Standard 2.5a, and you will analyze the Readiness Standard in your IFD to gain a deeper understanding of how to use the standard to focus on learning. Materials you will need today are your Unit 1 IFD, Organizing Instruction using the TEAC Standard Types document, and the PLC for Reading PLC. For the first 6 weeks, the curriculum preview will target Readiness Standard 2.5a. Based on the heat map displayed, please pause and discuss what conclusions that you draw about 2.5a. Look at the question from the 2014 English 2 STAR that assesses 2.5a. What level of specificity is this question? Now that we've identified our hotspot as 2.5a, let's focus on learning by first identifying the TEACs and then discussing the 4 essential questions. Please locate 2.5a in your IFD. Pause the video to allow everyone to locate this. Our 4 essential questions to guide our PLC are: what do we expect our students to learn? How will we know if they've learned it? What do we do when they don't? And how do we enrich those students who do learn? To set a purpose for reading, when we study a standard, we read with this question in mind. To focus on learning, start by studying the standard to answer the first essential question: what do we want our students to learn? At this time, pause the video to locate Unit 1 in your IFD. Find your Knowledge and Skills Statement 2.5 listed on page 20. Let's review the levels of specificity. There are 3 components to each TEAC and SE: the cognitive, content, and context. For students are asked to understand, make inferences, and draw conclusions. Notice the cognitive level of Bloom's in which students are asked to think. The structure and elements of fiction are the content, the what that students are learning. The context is the how in which students practice and show their learning. Figure 19b helps students make complex inferences, and it may be assessed as a readiness or supporting standard. Now let's specifically look at the hotspot, 2.5a. This standard is part of Category 2, Understanding Analysis of Literary Text. Please pause the video at this time for discussion and to find this in your IFD. What is the verb and the cognitive level of Bloom's? What's the content, the what students are learning? What's the context, the how in which they will practice and show their learning? Did you notice that the cognitive level is the verb analyze? The content is isolated scenes, and the context is the variety of works of fiction and the steps in analysis. According to the standards, what do we want our students to learn? How will we make it relevant and rigorous for them? Take a moment to write the learning statement out. Then collaborate about how you can make learning relevant and rigorous for your students. Question 2, how will we know students have learned? This is what we look for in everyday instruction, the knowing. Do students know and can they demonstrate their learning? As we use the content builder, let's build our plan for learning with this question in mind. This diagram helps illustrate that when planning for instruction, it is vital that concepts be taught in connection with process standards. Students use processes to acquire and demonstrate understanding. The tools to know process standards act as a stimulus for students by providing strategies and structures students use to access their learning. In English 1 and 2, Figure 19B is the tools to know process. Figure 19A is the way to show process. Provides students a way to demonstrate understanding and communicate their application of learning. Still looking at Unit 1 and your IFD on page 20 through 22, please take a moment to review the placement of each TEK. Notice that there is only one readiness standard, but the two supporting standards are essential to provide the foundation for learning. To understand the rationale of the Figure 19B process standards, take a look at the highly tested Figure 19 standards for grades K through 12. The process standards are the ways to show learning through figures 19A, D, E, and F. Let's revisit question 2. During and after building a plan using what we know about the process standards, we want to compose a response to this question. How will we know students learned? How will we gauge if students know and can demonstrate their learning to the depth and complexity of the standard? Please pause the video to discuss this question. Remember that the supporting standards are the scaffolds of learning. They are the prerequisite skills students may need to begin learning the standard. If students aren't successful at learning the large concepts or they have gaps, you need to start with what they should already know and then begin interventions with these standards. Discuss the following question and what it may look like on your campus. How will we provide students with additional time and support in a timely, directive, and systematic way when they experience difficulty? Please pause this time to allow for discussion. The fourth essential question to focus on learning is how do we enrich those who do learn? This question addresses the need to enrich students who are learning and take their thinking and learning to a higher level. As a collaborative team, it's important to begin by aligning your understanding of the standard with the verb, the skill, and the context. The team should agree on what students must be able to do to demonstrate mastery at the highest level, should align understanding of the supporting standards to know where instruction begins. You should check for understanding through numerous formative assessments, collect and review your data to make instructional decisions, and use your team data to adjust your instructional plans. For this video, I will model for you how to use the PLC for reading PLC. In the upcoming videos, I will use the gradual release model so that your PLC teams can complete this task independently. Short story is the text I chose to model the instructional strategy. The levels of thinking are to establish a purpose for reading, use background knowledge, summarize, make inferences, and ask interpretive, evaluative, and universal questions in the text. The evidence of learning will be writing using the Notice and Note graphic organizer and through student discussions, and the instructional strategy is to make inferences by using close reading and cooperative learning strategies. Although the Notice and Note strategies can be used with short stories, literary nonfiction, and poetry, the 25 most commonly taught novels in grades 9 and 10 contain 6 common signposts of Notice and Note. The Notice and Note signposts are contrasts and contradictions, aha moments, again and again, tough questions, words of the wiser, and memory moments. The Notice and Note sample charts with text feature anchor questions and literary elements it supports. The signposts emphasize the text features, reveals the questions that students should consider as they read. This is your text-dependent questions where students make inferences and use text evidence. The signposts represent what we want students to do while they're reading, the anchor questions. It helps them understand. And you need to create an anchor chart in your classroom. These charts will serve as anchor lessons and remind students to always notice and note. When teaching the signposts, decide an order. Set aside time to teach each one, although some may be taught together. Teach each with a lesson that illustrates the targeted signpost. Use the gradual release model. Think about generalizable language you will use, which students can carry with them and transfer from one text to the next. The gradual release model works well with this close reading strategy. You will demonstrate, then turn over part of the task to the class, have them collaborate, and then they will do it on their own. Explain the signpost and the anchor question. Tell students you'll show them how the signpost you're teaching works by sharing a short text. Read aloud to the first occurrence of the signpost you're teaching. Read the second section, stop at the next instance. Read the third, perhaps a fourth. Read to the end. Finally, tell students to watch for the feature in their independent reading, to mark those they find and write down their thoughts as they think about and reflect on the anchor question. The gradual release model probably will not all be taught in one day. It will be a progression over time. The rationale and benefits of using notice and note is it's a scaffolding and helps students know how to close read and develops lifelong learning habits. It creates independent readers. It alerts them to what may be happening next in the text. Encourages them to use text evidence naturally. Encourages them to pay attention to specifics and encourages students to inference. Each signpost has several graphic organizers students can use to show their evidence of learning. This example is for contrast and contradictions. It serves as both a scaffold of learning and a demonstration of their learning. It has context clues students look for to identify the signposts, as well as anchor questions to stimulate their thinking. Here's an example of a student discussion during the reading of Tuesday of Another June. Students notice the contrast and contradiction of June's close relationship with her mom, but June fails to tell her she's been physically and emotionally abused by another girl named June every Tuesday at swim practice. Students are processing their thoughts to the question, why is the character doing that? Later, students reflected and wrote about the most important signpost in the short story, answering each of the anchor questions and formulated theme statements for the text. Connecting reading and writing, the next day, students used entries to begin writing a literary response to this selection, complete with their thesis statement, text evidence, and the life lesson learned. Thank You, Ma'am by Langston Hughes is another short story to easily teach students contrasts and contradictions and other signposts. I appreciate your participation in the PLC curriculum preview. When you plan to implement notice and note reading strategies, please invite me in, as I would love to see your classroom implementation, or if you'd like me to come in and do a model lesson. If you have suggestions for future curriculum previews, please submit your ideas to my email on the screen. I would love to hear from you if you have an instructional strategy that you would like to showcase in our upcoming videos. Finally, please be sure to submit a copy of the PLC for Reading PLC document to the appropriate campus designee. Thank you so much.